Hello and welcome to 100 Yards of Football, Sports Talk Radio. I am your producer, Jeremiah Long, and joining me is the man himself, the football encyclopedia, Mr. Football, Vincent Turner. How's it going, Vincent?
Hey, man, beautiful day today. Great morning. I always love to talk about college football at the highest level.
So this is a huge history special, one that we have been really excited to get going for a while. The 1979 championship Alabama Crimson Tide team. So this is a team that I'm sure gets you very psyched up, especially when we start talking about SEC and just the general landscape of the world in 1979 and everything that was going on. So without further ado on that, Vincent, I'm going to let you take over and jump in there for the 1979 Alabama team.
Well, as you know, I'm a history guy, so I'm going to start back. In 1979, at this time, when Alabama won the national championship, was so ironic. It was Bryant's last national championship as a head coach at the University of Alabama. But most of all, that season was very special for me because I was a sophomore at the University of Arkansas. Much love to the Hogs out there, down there in the northwest part of the state of Arkansas. And I was in the dorm watching the University of Alabama play every week, seemingly on ABC. But what stuck out to me from that 79 season, as I all know, Sports Illustrated was a real big publication at the time. And it came out every week. In the November edition, matter of fact, November the 12th, 1979, they had four guys that was on their front cover. There was Jimmy Jordan, quarterback, Florida State. There was Delutric Brown, quarterback, University of Houston. Art Schlichter, quarterback, Ohio State. And Jarvis Redwine out of Inglewood, California, by way of Nebraska. He was on the front cover. And the last one, bringing up the rear, I did say four, but I meant five, was Stedman Shealy out of the University of Alabama. And at that time, all those teams were still in the mix to be number one at the end of the year. And they held that up, that great finger, number one. But the thing that stuck out, I said, hey, man, the University of Alabama is probably going to take this title simply because they got the best quarterback in the country, Stedman Shealy. And he was a senior at the time. And I just didn't see how anybody was to surpass Alabama because he was the most experienced guy and he was a tremendous football player. Now, getting into the 79 season, the Alabama team was very, very special. They weren't flashy. There was a hard-nosed football team, balanced on both sides of the ball. Offensively, I'm going to start there. They ran the wishbone. They really had three fullbacks in the backfield to go along with Stedman Shealy. Steve Whitman, who was an outstanding football player. Major Ogilvie, who's probably one of the top 10 greatest players in Alabama history. And, of course, the hard rock man, Mr. Billy Jackson. And when you look at it, they had 763 rushing attempts that year. So they was rushing the football. They weren't really throwing it all around the yard. They had 213 first downs. And like I said, they had three backs over 500 yards that year. But the man that pulled the trigger, who's really the architect of the offense, was Stedman Shealy out of Dothan, Alabama. And the reason I loved him so much is that he led the team in rushing, averaging 5.2 yards a carry. But that year, this is why you got to have special football players on your team. There's one game, if it, to me, epitomizes really two games that epitomizes Alabama's season that year. Against the University of Tennessee in October, they were down 17-0. Stedman Shealy was able to keep that team together. They rallied behind him. Their offense stayed in with their game plan, and they came back and won that football game 27-17. Then the last game, the Iron Bowl against Auburn, they're down 18-17 in the fourth quarter. Stedman Shealy comes out, senior quarterback, Dothan, Alabama, and he takes that team on an 82-yard drive, 7 plays, scored to win it, had the winning touchdown, and Alabama went on to win that football game 25-18, and the rest is history. When you look at Stedman Shealy, we look at all the glorious people that's won the national championship at that position. And Tim Tebow loved him a lot, no question about it. But when you look at Stedman Shealy, I would put him up there with Tim Tebow in that one season leading his team to national championship. But speaking on the offense, let's talk about the defense. And we all know I'm a defensive guy. That Alabama team that year had basically one of the best defenses in all of college football history. That year, they allowed only 67 points a game. They only gave up 2 rushing touchdowns. They had one of the best front sevens that's ever came through college football. Wayne Hamilton, Curtis McGriff, Brian Braggs, David Hanna, baby brother of John Hanna. Outstanding linebackers, Randy Scott, Thomas Boyd. I think one of the best players that came out of the state of Tennessee. I don't know how he ended up in Alabama, out of Nashville. Much love to the Nashville, Tennessee, E.J. Jr., the defensive backfield, Don McNeil, 2 outstanding safeties, Jim Bob Taylor, Tommy Wilcox, who was a true freshman, one of the most outstanding defenses in the country. They were 3rd in the nation allowing points per game, 5 points per game. But the main statistic that stuck out to me that year, they intercepted 25 passes, which at that time was a school record. So when you look at this Alabama team, heads down, Bryant's final national championship team, very balanced on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively, and all. Don't let me leave out. They had an outstanding offensive line. I don't mean to step back, but Jim Brunch and my man who went on and had an outstanding career with the Miami Dolphins, Dwight Stevenson out of Hampton, Virginia, man, he was the orchestra of one of the best offensive lines in all of college football history. So that's what makes this Alabama team of 1979 one of the most special teams in college football history.
Absolutely, man. Like, it's just one of those teams that everything they did was just dominant. And they had incredible offensive line, incredible defensive line, incredible coaching. And honestly, they didn't have an easy schedule by any means. This was still a hard schedule. What were some of the hardest teams they faced that season?
Well, like I said, they had 3 scares that year. They played LSU in November on a rainy night. Didn't score offensive touchdown, but held LSU 0 that night. Ended up winning that football game 3-0. As I mentioned, they played a very good Tennessee team that was led by a senior quarterback at the time, Jimmy Streeter. We know how well he was at the University of Tennessee. You being from Oak Ridge, so you know about Jimmy Streeter. They fell behind in that football game 17-0, but came back and won that game 27-17. And then, of course, the Auburn game, rival game, Iron Bowl, very tough Auburn team that year that was very talented. A lot of people don't know they had Joe Cribbs in the backfield, James Brooks, 2 guys that went on and had outstanding NFL careers, outstanding football team. And that was probably, to me, their toughest game of the year because it was behind in the 4th quarter. But as I always said, when you got big-time players make special plays. And to me, they had the best player at that time in the country. And I know Charles White won the Heisman Trophy that year, but Stedman Shealy, to me, was the best player at the time. Senior quarterback, been in the system, led that team on an 82-yard drive, 7 plays, was behind the winning touchdown to win that football game. Alabama wins that game 25-18. They go on to destroy my University of Arkansas Hogs in the Sugar Bowl 24-9, and the rest is history. Because when you look at Stedman Shealy, he doesn't get a lot of credit, but he was the guy that particular year was one of the best players that ever came through the University of Alabama, along with Major Ogilvie. Outstanding football player. I can't say no more about him. Tremendous running back, a guy that did everything straight arrow, a guy, when you look at him, didn't have the juke like a Tony Dorsett or the wiggle like O.J. Simpson or the power of Herschel Walker. There was a young man from Birmingham, from Mountain Brook, Alabama, outside Birmingham. I'm talking about Major Ogilvie. He was a guy, every time you looked at him carrying the football, he was getting up the field. And if you look at it, he had some big plays a year. What sticks out to me is that he had that 50-yard punt return in the Sugar Bowl against the University of Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't think anybody's going to forget the history and the legacy that this particular Alabama team put together. So, what's that? Go ahead.
But you brought up one good point. Mm-hmm. You brought up an excellent point. You said the coaching. Don't let me leave that out.
Yes.
Outstanding D coordinator, Ken Donahue. Mm-hmm. Outstanding secondary coach, Bill Oliver. But a lot of people don't know this. A young man that was coming up through the ranks, played at the University of Alabama, coached the linebackers, and Alabama had some serious linebackers that year. Let me repeat their names again. Randy Scott, Thomas Boyd, and the guy that went on and played with the Arizona Cardinals, Mr. E.J. Jr., as I met out of Nashville, Tennessee, one of the most highly recruited players. The coach I'm talking about, Sylvester Crooms. So we need to give him a lot of love today. At a time, a young guy coming up through the ranks, and Coach Crooms coached the linebackers, which to me was the most strongest part of their defense.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah. That's just like so many reasons to be noteworthy. And for everybody who went to school at Alabama during this time, or was just in Alabama at this time, or just loved Alabama football at that time, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Tell us what you thought your best moments from the 1979 Alabama Crimson Tide season were. Whether did you go to one of the bowl games? Did you go to the Sugar Bowl? What is it that really stood out for Mr. Turner? Of course, he always is going to remember that that loss to that Arkansas loss because it was an amazing team versus a team that he really felt strongly about at the time too. So yeah, those are huge things and huge memories. I always learn so much on these history specials. It's one of the reasons we really love doing these. And every time that we get together with Vincent Turner, I always learn something else about the intricacies of what actually happens. Not just about that win-loss score at the very end. What were the coaches that made that specific season so special? What were the players doing? What were the strategies? So those are the things that I think we have to unpack, because otherwise you might forget some of the subtleties, like some of those near losses during that season. They had to fight and they had to get their gumption together and they had to really push to be able to actually make this such a great season, because it could have went sideways very easily several times during that season. So for 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio, I am the producer, Jeremiah Long. You've been watching our history special on the 1979 Crimson Tide championship season with our host and our football expert extraordinaire, Mr. Football Turner. So if you'd like to see some more with us, then please stay tuned with us all week. We come live every Monday and Wednesday with some amazing people, amazing interviews, history specials, prospects, and more. So until then, we'll see you guys next week.